Hello. How are you guys doing today? This is Jordan Cannon, your Vice President of Education and Portfolio Manager for the Ole Miss Finance Club. And this is the Bulls, Bears, and Rebels podcast, your go-to resource for everything finance related. And today, I'm glad you guys are tuning back in. I want to talk a little bit about the recruitment process and of securing those internships and really what it takes to stand out when you're going through that process. Today here I have Lanie, Max, and Logan, who are all a part of the Ole Miss investment group. And I just kind of wanted to get them in and talk about what they did during their internship process and what really helped them stand out and succeed while they were trying to obtain those really competitive placements. But without further ado, I want to jump into the first point, which is starting early is extremely crucial. One of the biggest keys to success in recruiting is starting early. But before I dive into the importance of starting early, I'd really like to introduce Lanie Nevil, who just finished her internship at JP Morgan in Dallas. And so I'll bring her over and she'll talk a little bit about just starting early on the recruiting process. One of the first questions that I have for Lanie is, when did you start preparing for recruiting?
I started preparing at the very start of my junior year. However, I do wish I started with more prep work during my sophomore year summer. But once I got back to school for my junior year, everything went in full swing. I started right out of the gate, started applying as those internships started opening in August and early September for the past year's recruiting cycle.
Okay, that's cool. So when you were going through the initial steps of the recruiting process and preparing, what were the most crucial first steps that you took to help you prepare?
The very first thing that I did is I made sure that my resume was updated. I edited it a lot, updating my internship experience, my work experience, my grades and relevant coursework, and I just made sure that it was very clean and up to date. Then I went and I took another look at my LinkedIn profile and I made sure that was very cohesive and matched my resume. And then I uploaded both of those to a app that the university lets us use to make the internship process easier, which is Handshake. Building my Handshake profile was probably something during the early stages of the recruitment process that helped me the most because it made it a lot smoother and easier to apply for internships quickly and efficiently.
So for our members who are just now getting into the recruiting and talking to recruiters, would you recommend to them to go ahead and start up that Handshake profile?
100%. I think Handshake helped me a ton. It makes it a lot easier to see all the opportunities available to you, and you can see Ole Miss alum that have worked there. Recruiters can reach out to you. It's very similar to LinkedIn, but it's more aimed towards college students, which I think helped a lot because it kind of simplified everything, and it's recruiters who are just looking for internships and new grads. They aren't looking for senior roles or anything like that. It's very college focused.
Definitely. And I've had the same experience using Handshake, and that's something I try to tell a lot of students and members, that being able to have access to sites like Handshake is, I mean, the people out there, the recruiters are out there reaching out to you. And so it really helps you get in front of the people that you need to get in front of. And it's just a complete competitive advantage. You're honestly missing out if you're not on Handshake, if you're not on LinkedIn. Those are absolutely crucial. One last question before we go ahead and transition. Of course, hindsight is always 2020, but do you wish that you would have started earlier, preparing and getting ready for the cycle?
100%. I wish I would have done more prep during my sophomore summer. However, my whole process kind of got fast tracked because at the end of my freshman year, I decided to fully graduate a year early. So that kind of just made me jump right off the deep end, and I didn't really have time to look for that sophomore summer internship anymore. I just went straight into the junior summer. But honestly, I think staying prepared, updating your resume after every semester with a new GPA, new work experience, I think it's the best thing you can do to kind of always stay prepared for any opportunity that might present itself, because you never know when you're going to run into an Ole Miss alum that wants that copy of your resume or anything like that. Recruiting is always happening. So I think always keeping your LinkedIn and resume updated is one of the best things you can do to kind of have that competitive advantage over your peers.
You know what? And I love that you also stress not only the importance of starting early, but also emphasizing consistency when you're going through this. Like she said, updating your GPA, updating your resume, by semester, because you never know when the opportunity will, arise itself where you're in the room with the right person and they do ask for your resume. And if it's not correct, if it's not 100% up to date, then, you won't be as prepared and as capable to take full advantage of that opportunity. So I really do like what you said right there, and I appreciate the insights that you brought in. Another factor that I really want to touch on, which we just touched on a little bit, is networking. Networking is super important, and building relationships with industry professionals, alumni, and even other students can really open doors that applications alone just can't. And so to talk a little bit more about recruiting, I want to bring in Max Palermo, who is our director of recruiting. Max did an internship at Genesis Park, which is a private equity firm down in Houston, Texas. And so one of the first questions I have for Max is, what role did networking play in helping you land your internship?
Yeah, Jordan, can't stress enough how important it is to network. Obviously, it's the biggest factor in my opinion. It made all the difference for me. I personally wouldn't even have known about the internship that I got last summer in Houston if I hadn't been reaching out to people, to the right people, that had gotten me connected and let me know about the opportunity. It really helped me get my foot in the door, and having someone internally vouch for you and over an application or whatever, it really makes all the difference in my opinion.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. And I also want to ask, like, were there any specific strategies or approaches that you feel like worked best for you when you were reaching out to these industry professionals?
Yeah, so absolutely. I would say you want to have meaningful conversations. Do whatever you can when you're speaking and networking with people who you want to gain an opportunity from. I would definitely say try to make that conversation as memorable as possible. Make yourself stick out to them. And I would also say, don't get discouraged when you don't get a response or don't, get the reply that you wanted to, because you just have to keep trying and keep pushing. You have to keep putting yourself out there, and you have to have resiliency, or else you're not going to survive.
That's another part of the networking process is being okay with rejection, because you'll reach out to people and sometimes they won't even respond on LinkedIn, sometimes they won't email you back, sometimes they do email you back, and you may be able to set up a phone call with them and the phone call just doesn't go that great. But I mean, that's fine. Everybody, you're not going to be able to build a perfect relationship with every professional that you reach out to, but just being consistent and persevering through that. And it's going to be uncomfortable because you're speaking to people that you're not comfortable speaking with. On an average day, you may talk to your friends, you're talking to other students, other 20-year-olds. So it's a little bit of a different conversation when you're speaking to 35, 40, 45, 50-year old adults that are professional, like Max just said. Being able to accept that rejection and keep on moving forward is very important to the process. If you, Max, could give one piece of advice on networking to our members, one key piece of advice that you think would help out, what would that key piece of advice be?
So Jordan, I definitely would say it's a two-parter for me, and I would say number one part of that is consistency matters, and that's staying in touch with the people that you are networking with, and you find it important to maintain the relationship with them. You don't want to disappear after a couple weeks and just be MIA. And I think that's important to just stay in touch. But also, this is going to sound kind of stupid, but I think it's part of you have to play the game. You have to not be afraid to reach out to them. And if by not being afraid to reach out to people, just kind of cold calling, emails, whatever, I think that the most people will understand and be happy to approach you respectfully. Obviously, you're gonna get more not responses than responses, but at the end of the day, you have to do that. You have to play the game. You have to keep putting yourself out there, and don't be afraid of rejection.
Awesome. No, I really like what Max just said right there. And the next step of the process after you do the networking and after you do the preparation is the interview process, which is that's game time right there. That's, the lights are on you and all the preparation and all the work that you put in to getting into the interview, that is your time to shine. And so it's really crucial that you do your due diligence and that once you obtain that interview, that you're able to make the most out of that opportunity and give off the best impression to whatever company you're interviewing for. And to dive a little bit more into that, I'd like to bring in Logan Rodgers, who also just completed his internship in New York at APA Bonds as a finance intern. I'd like to ask Logan, when you did your interview prep, what did your preparation process look like?
So yeah, my interview process started last year where I took the Wall Street prep course that the finance club provided me, which really just got down my technicals, which was crucial for my interview. And then another big thing that I had to do was research everything about the company and what they did, because one of the first questions they asked me during my interview was, do you know what we do and why us? And you really want to be able to answer those questions with your full confidence.
Definitely. I agree, especially with those softball questions. You really need to be able to give a great, concise and straightforward answer. And especially when they ask you the question of what do you know about this company? You really need to be able to convey to them that you've done your research, you fully understand the role that you're applying for and what the company does. Go ahead and moving along. So Logan, were there any specific resources, maybe online or even hard copy resources or strategies that you found very helpful when you were going through the process?
Yeah, so some resources that helped me were the 400 question guide to finance that the Wall Street Prep provided me with. And then you can also go on Wall Street Oasis or like Reddit to see some interview questions that are already there. But another thing that helped me was during the networking process that Max was talking about, there's also some questions you can ask the people you're networking with that will ultimately be the answers to some of the questions they're asking in the interview, like why us or why our firm. You can get that from the people you're networking with.
Awesome, awesome. And so one last question, just go ahead and wrap up for you, Logan. What was one mistake that you think candidates should avoid most during interviews?
Yeah, that one mistake is definitely not having questions for them after they interview you. You'll just look not interested in the company and you looks like you don't even want to be there. So please just have 3 to 4 questions to ask them after so you could just show you that you're interested in working there.
Definitely. No, I've heard from recruiters that having those questions prepared and ready to ask not only shows that you're engaged with the company, but for you, you also have to remember that as much as the company is interviewing you, you are also interviewing the company. Not every position that you apply for and that you interview for, or even that you may even obtain the position, it's not always a perfect fit. Things like company culture, things like work-life balance. Those are things, maybe regular daily routines. Those are things that you need to take into account and that you need to ask yourself, okay, is this not only am I what the company is looking for, but also is the company what I am looking for as well? So I also want to touch on a little bit about the challenges of recruiting, because recruiting is not easy, and there's always challenges and humps that you'll face when you're going through the process. First off, especially in finance, a lot of these high finance roles are very competitive, and there's very limited opportunities. And so, you'll have to do, kind of like what Max said, you'll have to play the game, you'll have to reach out on LinkedIn, you'll have to set up coffee chats, virtual coffee chats, whatever you can do. Because if you won't do it, then there's another candidate, there's another student out there that may, and that might be what gives them the leg up over you during the recruiting process. And I'm saying all this understanding, as a student, we're balancing school, we're balancing club obligations, people have to go to work. We understand that it is a lot to balance. And, throwing what I just said on top of preparing for interviews and networking, it can be a lot. But that's really, going that extra mile and putting in that work is what separates the high performers and the high achievers from the middle of the pack. And so if you can figure out a way to manage your time and get done what you need to get done. It'll only benefit you tenfold. And also, kind of like what we said earlier, going through the process, staying resilient, facing rejection and with grace, facing rejection with grace, and being able to keep moving forward and not lose sight of your goal, your purpose, and not get unmotivated. That's a huge part of the process as well. But as we wrap up today, I really want to thank Lanie, Max, and Logan for sharing their experiences. Like I said, as the recap, just start early, network intentionally, and prepare thoroughly for the interviews, and just make sure that you stay resilient overall. But just to go ahead and sign off here, this has been the Bulls, Bears, and Rebels podcast, the official podcast for the Ole Miss Finance Club. And we really appreciate you guys tuning in today, and we'll catch you on the next episode.